Imagine walking along the desolate, mist-shrouded coast of the Baltic Sea 3,500 years ago. It is midwinter. The temperature is 20 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. The sky is the color of bruised iron. The tide has receded after 3 days of violent, hurricane-force storms that tore into the underwater geological strata of the seabed. You are shivering beneath a heavy mantle of wool and wolf fur, your breath pluming into the frost. As you pick your way through mounds of tangled brown kelp and shattered driftwood on the gravel beach of the Sambia Peninsula, a glint of color catches your eye. In a prehistoric northern world that is 99% gray, white, and dark mud brown, you see something that does not belong to the natural landscape. You kneel in the freezing slush. You pick it up. It is a nodule the size of a human fist. It looks like a common rock, but the moment your skin touches it, your brain registers something unnatural. It is not cold. A piece of granite, limestone, or flint taken from freezing water feels like a shard of ice against your palm, draining the heat from your blood. But this object absorbs your body heat. Within seconds, it feels alive. It feels warm. You wipe away the wet sand and salt water with your thumb. The stone is translucent, glowing with the deep, fiery color of molten honey, dark cognac, and liquid gold. And when you lift it up against the pale, low winter sun and peer into its amber depths, you freeze in absolute terror and wonder. Suspended in the exact center of the stone, frozen in time with microscopic, three-dimensional clarity, is a creature, a spider with all 8 legs outstretched, its delicate web spinners intact, or a prehistoric wasp with its gossamer wings spread as if mid-flight. You have no concept of paleontology. You have no concept of deep geological time. You do not know that 50 million years ago, during the Eocene epoch, a colossal subtropical forest of coniferous trees, Pinus succinifera covered northern Europe, exuding protective aromatic resins that fossilized under millions of tons of marine sediment and pressure. Consider the botanical and climatic drama of the Eocene epoch. 50 million years ago, northern Europe was not a freezing realm of subarctic tundra and pine forests. It was a dense, subtropical jungle of colossal amber-bearing conifers, palm trees, and giant cycads. The Pinus succinifera trees grew to heights exceeding 150 feet. When violent Eocene storms snapped massive limbs, or when wood-boring beetles and fungal pathogens attacked the trunks, the trees responded with massive resinosis, exuding rivers of sticky, golden sap to encapsulate the invaders. As the centuries passed, entire forests fell and were submerged beneath ancient seas. Under millions of tons of marine glauconitic sands, known in geology as blue earth, the volatile terpenes in the resin evaporated, and the organic molecules underwent high-pressure cross-linking polymerization. The liquid tears of ancient trees transformed into indestructible succinate resin, waiting for the glaciers of the Ice Age to scrape away the sediment and expose the golden veins to the first human hunters. In the folklore of the Baltic peoples, the ancient Prussians, Lithuanians, and Latvians, the origin of amber is preserved in the tragic love story of the sea goddess Jurate and the mortal fisherman Castitis. According to Baltic myth, Jurate lived in a magnificent, glowing underwater palace built entirely of pure amber deep beneath the Baltic Sea. When Castitus cast his nets into her sacred waters, the goddess fell deeply in love with the mortal man. Enraged by this sacrilegious union between a mortal and an immortal, Perkunas, the supreme Baltic god of thunder and lightning, struck the sea with his terrifying thunderbolts, destroying the Amber Palace and killing Castitus. To this day, Baltic tradition teaches that the amber nodules washing ashore after winter storms are the shattered fragments of Juratas' underwater palace, while the smallest, translucent amber drops are the tears of the grieving sea goddess mourning her lost mortal lover. And look at the extraordinary organic chemistry that preserved those ancient tears. Amber is not a single chemical compound. It is a complex, macromolecular polymer formed by the polycondensation of labdanide diterpenes. When the ancient Eocene conifer Pinus succinifera produced resin, it was synthesizing a chemical defense cocktail composed of monoterpenes, sesquiterpenes, and succinic acid _2-EXT, COH, Over millions of years, as volatile terpenes evaporated, the remaining diterpene chains linked together into a dense, three-dimensional, cross-linked organic polymer that is virtually insoluble in water, weak acids, and organic solvents. Because succinic acid has natural antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and antimicrobial properties, any organic tissue, whether an insect wing, a spider leg, or a prehistoric pine needle, trapped inside the fresh resin was immediately sterilized, dehydrated, and sealed in an airtight, biological time capsule that preserved cellular structures for 50 million years. To understand why amber was scattered across the European continent, one must look at the colossal bulldozer of the Pleistocene Ice Age. Over the past 2 million years, for successive continental glacial advances, the Menapian, Elsterian, Salian, and Weichselian glaciations, carved into the tertiary sedimentary basins of Scandinavia and the Baltic. Ice sheets over 2 miles thick scraped millions of tons of amber-rich blue earth from the bedrock of the ancient Baltic River delta, incorporating the fossilized resin into the glacial till and ground moraines. As the ice sheets melted during interglacial warm periods, torrential glacial meltwater rivers transported amber nodules hundreds of miles to the south and west, depositing them along the river valleys of the Elbe, the Oder, the Vistula, and even across the submerged Doggerland Plain to the eastern coast of England. The Earth itself had prepared the geographical conveyor belts that prehistoric humans would follow millennia later. To your Bronze Age mind, there is only one possible, terrifying explanation. This is not a rock. This is magic. In classical Greek religious mythology, this ancient northern connection was immortalized in the sacred myth of Hyperborea, the mythical land beyond the north wind. According to the poets Pindar and Herodotus, every autumn, the sun god Apollo mounted a golden chariot drawn by white swans and flew north to spend the dark winter months living among the blessed Hyperboreans, a people who lived in perpetual peace, feasting, and sunshine. Every spring, the Hyperboreans sent sacred tribute bundles wrapped in wheat straw south along the amber road to the temple of Apollo on the sacred island of Delos, gifts of gold and amber, virgin priestesses, and sacred songs. The myth of Hyperborea was the poetic memory of a physical reality, that for centuries, the spiritual and economic life of the Mediterranean sun gods was sustained by the golden amber flowing south from the freezing forests of the north. This is solidified sunlight that crashed into the dark waters of the sea. These are the golden tears of the sun goddess, weeping for the dead heroes of the sky. In Greek mythology, when Phaeton, the son of the sun god Helios, lost control of the solar chariot and plunged burning into the mythical Eridanos river, his grieving sisters, the Heliades, wept uncontrollably on the riverbanks, and the gods transformed them into black poplar trees whose falling tears hardened into golden amber. And you know that if you can carry this fist-sized lump of frozen light south, across the freezing rivers, through the wolf-infested ancient oak forests, and over the snow-capped wall of the Alps, men who rule over glittering stone empires beneath the blazing southern sky will pay for this single piece of resin with 20 bronze swords, 100 jars of fine wine, and enough gold to buy the life of every man in your clan. You are listening to the Grand Narrative. I am your host, and this is Season 1, The First Networks. In Episode 1 and Episode 2, we traced how early humans connected through volcanic stone and ocean waves across the deserts and floodplains of the Near East. Today, in Episode 3, we turn our compass due north. We are plunging into the dark, untamed wilderness of prehistoric Europe. We are going to trace a 2,000-mile continental artery that bridged two entirely different worlds: the fur-clad, tribal warrior societies of the Baltic and the sun-worshipping, gold-drenched pharaohs of the Mediterranean. This is the story of a trade route that carried more than luxury. It carried the electrical spark of human consciousness. We are walking the Amber Road. To understand the power of the Amber Road, we have to dismantle a modern historical bias. When people think of the ancient world in 1500 BCE, they focus almost exclusively on the Mediterranean basin and the Near East. We think of the new kingdom of Egypt at the peak of its imperial glory, under Thutmose III and Hatshepsut. We think of the glittering palaces of the Minoans on Crete, the Cyclopean stone fortresses of the Mycenaeans in Greece, and the roaring chariots of the Hittites in Anatolia. We look at northern and central Europe during this same era, and we dismiss it as a primitive, illiterate wasteland of barbarians. We imagine small clans of hairy tribesmen living in mud huts, wandering aimlessly through primordial oak forests, completely disconnected from the grand march of civilization. Archaeology over the past 50 years has proven that picture to be completely, categorically false. Northern and Central Europe in the Bronze Age, specifically the Nordic Bronze Age and the Unitas and tumulus cultures of Central Europe, was not a primitive backwater. It was a sophisticated, wealthy, and hyperdynamic warrior-trader aristocracy. These people did not build stone pyramids because they lived in an ecosystem dominated by wood. But their craftsmanship in bronze, gold, and organic materials rivaled anything produced in Thebes or Babylon. Look at the artifacts recovered from Danish and German peat bogs: the Trundholm sun chariot, a bronze horse pulling a gilded bronze solar disk, cast with breathtaking geometric precision in 1400 BCE. Look at the curved bronze loves, musical horns over 6 feet long, cast in sections using the lost wax technique with such acoustic perfection that modern symphonic horn players can play complex musical scales on them. These northern societies were obsessed with the sun. In a climate where winter brought 18 hours of darkness and 6 months of freezing gloom, the sun was not just a deity. The sun was life itself. And in their hands, The people of the North held the only material on Earth that seemed to embody the physical essence of the sun. Baltic amber. Let us examine why amber drove the ancient world into a frenzy of economic obsession. In the ancient Near East and Mediterranean, royalty and priesthoods were accustomed to precious stones. They had blue lapis lazuli from the mountains of Afghanistan. They had green turquoise from the Sinai Desert. They had blood-red carnelian from the Indus Valley. They had amethyst, jasper, and quartz. Every single one of those stones was a mineral. They were cold, heavy, hard, and inert. Amber defied every physical property of a mineral. First, its weight and temperature. Amber has a specific gravity of only 1.05 to 1.10. That means it is barely heavier than water. In salty ocean water, amber actually floats to the surface and washes ashore with the tides. When you hold a necklace made of 20 large amber beads, it feels weightless compared to a necklace of mineral stone. And as we noted, it is an organic polymer with extremely low thermal conductivity. It never feels cold against bare skin. It warms instantly to the touch of human flesh, matching your body temperature like living skin. Second, its scent and combustion. If you take a piece of lapis lazuli or carnelian and toss it into a fire, it will crack or turn to ash. If you throw a piece of amber onto a campfire, it catches fire with a bright, luminous golden flame. And as it burns, it releases a rich, intoxicating, pine-like aromatic incense. To the ancient mind, burning amber was the ultimate sacred sacrifice. You were literally releasing the trapped essence of ancient sunlight back into the heavens to feed the gods. Third, and most terrifyingly, its electrostatic properties. If you take a dry piece of amber and rub it vigorously against a piece of woolen cloth or animal fur for 30 seconds, the resin develops a powerful negative static electrical charge. Hold a charged piece of amber over dry straw, feathers, bits of crushed leaves, or linen thread. Without touching them, the straw and the feathers will leap off the ground and fly upward through the air, sticking to the surface of the stone as if drawn by an invisible, living spirit. Think about what this meant to an ancient human in 1200 BCE. You live in a world without modern physics. You know nothing of electrons, subatomic particles, or electromagnetic fields. You believe that the universe is entirely animated by spirits, demons, and gods. Every other rock in the world sits dead in the dirt. But this golden stone, when stroked, exerts an invisible, magnetic force that can manipulate physical reality across empty space. The ancient Greeks were so profoundly mesmerized by this phenomenon that their word for amber was electron, derived from elector meaning the beaming sun. When 17th century European scientists began systematically studying the invisible physical forces of attraction, they named the phenomenon after this ancient golden resin, electricity. Every time you turn on an electric light, charge your phone, or boot up a computer, you are paying linguistic homage to the ancient Baltic resin that fascinated our ancestors. Because of these magical properties, amber was not treated as mere jewelry. It was medicine. Roman physicians like Pliny the Elder and Claudius Galen wrote treatises claiming that wearing amber around the neck cured goiters, tonsillitis, and diseases of the throat, and that powdered amber mixed with honey and rose oil cured ear infections, poor eyesight, and stomach ulcers. It was an amulet of protection. Gladiators in Rome wore amber beads stitched into their leather tunics for good luck in the arena. Mothers placed raw amber beads around the necks of teething infants to soothe their pain and ward off the evil eye. And above all, it was the ultimate supreme luxury status symbol. In the courts of Egypt, Mycenae, Babylon, and Rome, there was a limitless, unquenchable thirst for Baltic amber. The Roman poet Martial recorded that a tiny, carved amber figurine of a woman was worth more in the markets of Rome than 3 healthy, adult male slaves. The emperors of Rome paved the amphitheaters with amber. In the reign of Emperor Nero, during one lavish gladiatorial games, the nets protecting the spectators from wild beasts were tied with amber knots. The stretchers used to carry out dead gladiators were inlaid with amber, and over 13,000 pounds of Baltic amber were brought into Rome in a single imperial expedition led by a Roman equestrian knight. The medical fascination with amber persisted well into the Middle Ages and Renaissance. In the writings of Islamic physicians like Ibn Sina, amber, known in Arabic as karuba, was classified as a powerful cardiotomic and hemostatic agent. European alchemists distilled raw amber in glass retorts to extract oil of amber and succinic acid crystals, which were prescribed as royal elixirs against the Black Death and nervous melancholia. In 18th century Prussia, King Frederick William I constructed the legendary Amber Room in Charlottenburg Palace, an entire salon paneled in 6 tons of carved Baltic amber backed with gold leaf, which was later gifted to Tsar Peter the Great of Russia as a symbol of imperial friendship, cementing amber's status as the supreme diplomatic currency of European monarchies. Let us examine the physical reality of harvesting amber on the Baltic coast in the Bronze Age. The greatest natural concentration of amber in the world is located along the Sambia Peninsula, a geological thumb of land jutting into the southeastern Baltic Sea, flanked by the Curonian Lagoon and the Vistula Lagoon. Here, the coastal cliffs are composed of tertiary, blue earth, a dense, marine glauconitic clay layer up to 30 feet thick that sits directly at sea level. When ferocious winter storms blow out of the north and northwest, the towering ocean breakers smash against the base of these blue earth cliffs, eroding thousands of tons of clay and liberating millions of fossilized amber nodules into the freezing surf. The harvest could only occur during the height of winter gales. The amber gatherers, men and women belonging to the Baltic protocultures, stood waist-deep in the sub-zero, churning ocean breakers, dressed in greased seal-hide suits stuffed with dry straw for insulation. They wielded specialized long-handled dip nets woven from horsehair and hemp cords. As the violent waves receded, they scooped up masses of floating sea dangle, kelp, and debris, dragging the heavy nets up onto the freezing gravel beach. There, kneeling in the howling wind by torchlight, their fingers numb and bleeding, they sorted through the tangled seaweed to pluck out the glowing nodules of amber before the next incoming wave could sweep the treasure back out into the abyssal trenches of the sea. It was brutal, lethal physical labor. A single rogue winter breaker could knock a gatherer off their feet, dragging them beneath the freezing surf to drown in the darkness. Yet for 4,000 years, human beings risked their lives on these freezing beaches because they knew that a single basket of amber could buy the survival and military security of their clan for an entire generation. In Book 37 of his Monumental Naturalis Historia, the Roman scholar Pliny the Elder left behind the most extraordinary, detailed historical account of the imperial amber trade. Pliny writes, "Amber is imported from the shores of northern Germany. It was first brought into prominence by the luxury of Emperor Nero." A Roman equestrian knight, commissioned by Julianus, the superintendent of Nero's gladiatorial games, was sent to the north to procure amber in immense quantities. He traversed both the trade routes and the coasts of the northern sea, and brought back such a vast supply that the nets used to protect the podium against the wild beasts were studded with amber. The arms, the biers, and all the equipment used in the amphitheater for a single day were adorned with amber. The largest single lump brought to Rome weighed over 13 pounds. Look at the magnitude of that imperial mission. A Roman knight, accompanied by a small cavalry escort and veteran interpreters, rode 1,500 miles beyond the frontiers of the Roman Empire, past the Danube border fortresses, through the barbarian territory of the Germanic Marcomanni and the Polish Lugii, to reach the shores of the Baltic Sea. He carried sacks of Roman gold aurei, silver denarii, bronze wine vessels, and luxury glassware from the workshops of Alexandria. At the Baltic coast, he negotiated directly with local Germanic and Baltic chieftains, purchasing hundreds of crates of raw amber and hauling them back across the Alps to Rome. The wealth generated by this imperial trade transformed the tribal aristocracy of northern Europe. Archaeologists excavating Roman period chieftain burials in Poland and Denmark have discovered magnificent hoards of Roman luxury goods, silver drinking goblets engraved with scenes from the Iliad, bronze situli, Roman swords with ivory pommels, and thousands of silver coins, the physical currency paid by Rome to secure the uninterrupted flow of the magical Baltic resin. In the 1st century CE, the Greek physician Pedanius Dioscorides, serving as a military doctor in the Roman legions, wrote De Materia Medica, the foundational pharmacological textbook of the Western world for 1,500 years. Dioscorides devoted extensive chapters to the medical virtues of Baltic amber. He documented that finely ground amber powder mixed with pure mountain honey was an infallible remedy for acute pharyngitis, inflammatory eye infections, and chronic coughs. When mixed with mastics and mastic oil, it was applied to bone fractures and joint dislocations to relieve chronic pain and stimulate tissue healing. In the imperial luxury markets of Rome, the Septa Julia and the Via Sacra, specialized amber shops catered to the extravagant tastes of the Roman senatorial class. Roman aristocrats carried polished spheres of raw amber in their hands during the scorching summer months. Because amber has exceptionally low thermal conductivity and warms slowly, rolling the smooth stone between the fingers was believed to cool the hands and soothe the nerves. Roman noblewomen dyed their hair amber blonde to emulate the radiant golden hue of the Baltic resin, paying fortunes for imported northern hair dyes and amber hairpins carved with depictions of Cupid and Venus. The strategic geography of the Amber Road dictated the very layout of the Roman Empire's northern military frontier. Where the central Amber Road crossed the Danube River in modern Austria, the Roman Empire constructed one of its greatest military legionary fortresses and provincial capitals, Carnuntum. Carnuntum was home to the Legio XIV Gemina, and a thriving civilian city of over 50,000 inhabitants. Excavations by Austrian archaeologists reveal that Carnuntum was the primary customs clearinghouse for the entire amber trade of the Roman Empire. All amber caravans arriving from the barbarian north were required to stop at the imperial customs gates, where Roman tax collectors inspected the cargo manifests, assessed a 2.5% border tariff, and registered the goods before they were shipped down the paved military roads to Aquileia and Rome. And in the volcanic ash of Pompeii and Herculaneum, buried by the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE, archaeologists excavated dozens of intact amber treasures from the jewelry boxes of wealthy Roman noblewomen. Finely carved amber figurines of theater masks, grapes, and resting lions. Amber rings carved from single blocks of translucent honey resin. And delicate amber cosmetic spoons used for mixing perfumed facial powders. These Pompeian artifacts prove that for centuries, the luxury economy of the Roman senatorial aristocracy was directly linked to the freezing beaches of the Baltic Sea through the military checkpoint of Carnuntum. There was only one problem. The Mediterranean produced almost no amber. 90% of the world's high-grade succinite amber lay buried along the remote, freezing coastline of the Sambia Peninsula and the Gulf of Gdansk in modern-day Poland, Russia, and Lithuania. To get the tears of the sun from the Baltic Sea to the palaces of the Mediterranean required bridging the entire European continent across 2,000 miles of wilderness. When we talk about the Amber Road, we must correct a common misconception. The Amber Road was not a single, paved Roman military highway with stone mile markers, guard towers, and roadside inns. It was a vast, braided, continental riverine corridor, a network of natural water highways that cut through the heart of Europe from the Baltic Sea to the Adriatic Sea. Look at the topographical map of Europe. The European continent is dominated by great river systems that flow in two primary directions, north to the Baltic and North Seas, and south to the Black and Mediterranean Seas. Between these northern and southern river basins lies the great geographical spine of Central Europe, the Alps and the Carpathian Mountains. Ancient traders did not hack their way blindly through the primeval forests. They used the rivers as natural conveyor belts. There were four primary branches of the Amber Road that operated across different centuries. First, the eastern route, beginning at the Gulf of Riga and the Sambia Peninsula, traveling up the Vistula and Bug rivers, crossing through the Pripyat marshes, descending down the Dnieper River to the Black Sea, and sailing past the Crimean Peninsula straight to the ports of the Mycenaean Greeks and the Hittites. Second, the central route, starting at the mouth of the Vistula River in Poland, traveling south along the Varta River, crossing the low geological threshold between the Carpathians and the Sudetes, a natural mountain gap known as the Moravian Gate, descending down the Morava River into the Danube Valley, passing through Carnuntum, crossing through western Hungary past Lake Balaton, and terminating at the head of the Adriatic Sea at the ancient port of Aquileia near Venice. Third, the western route, traveling down the Elbe River through Germany, crossing through Bohemia, connecting to the Inn and Danube rivers, navigating through the dangerous Brenner Pass in the Alps, and descending down the Adige River directly into the plains of northern Italy. Fourth, the Atlantic Sea route, sailing from the Jutland Peninsula of Denmark, through the North Sea, down the Atlantic coast of France, through the Strait of Gibraltar, and into the western Mediterranean. Let us step into the boots of a trader moving along the Central Amber Road in 1300 BCE. You leave the amber-gathering camps on the Polish coast in late spring, as soon as the ice has melted from the rivers. Your cargo is packed into water-sealed leather hampers. You have 50 pounds of raw, unworked amber nodules of various grades, from cloudy yellow to crystal-clear red. Your vessel is a massive dugout canoe, a log-boat hollowed out from a single, colossal oak tree trunk, measuring up to 30 feet in length, capable of carrying half a ton of cargo, and a crew of 4 paddlers. You paddle upstream against the slow, muddy current of the Vistula River. Every 10 to 20 miles, you encounter an established river settlement belonging to a different tribal chieftain of the Lusatian culture. You do not simply paddle past. In the Bronze Age, every river crossing was a toll station. You must beach your canoe. You must present yourself to the local headman. You present a tribute, 3 raw amber beads, a small cake of salt, or a bronze axe blade. In exchange, the headman grants you guest friendship, safe passage through his clan's territory, a meal of roast pork and barley beer, and permission to sleep inside his fortified timber compound, safe from the wolves and raiders who prowl the riverbanks. After 3 weeks of continuous paddling, you reach the headwaters of the river. Now comes the most grueling physical challenge of the journey, the portage. You must drag your 30-foot oak canoe out of the water. You place felled logs beneath the hull to act as rollers. Straining against leather chest straps, you and your crew haul that massive dead weight over 5 miles of muddy hills to reach the next navigable river system. You navigate through the Moravian Gate, the narrow, wind-swept corridor between the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And then, as you enter the Danube Valley, the landscape changes. The muddy forests recede. Looming ahead on the southern horizon is a wall of white, the snow-capped, jagged peaks of the Eastern Alps. Crossing the Alps in the Bronze Age was an epic feat of endurance. You must abandon your canoes. You transfer your amber cargo onto pack horses or onto your own backs. You climb steep alpine tracks through the Semmering Pass or the Brenner Pass, navigating through snowdrifts, freezing sleet, and vertical gorges where one slip means falling 1,000 feet into a roaring glacial abyss. And then, you crest the final alpine ridge. You look south. The freezing northern winds drop. The air warms. Below you, spread out in the golden sunlight, are the lush, green vineyards and olive groves of northern Italy. You descend down into the Po Valley. You arrive at the great proto-urban trading emporium of Fradicina near the mouth of the Po River. Here at Fradicina, the barbarian world of the north meets the Mediterranean world of the south. In the open-air markets of the city, you smell roasting garlic, exotic spices, and sea salt. You hear Greek, Etruscan, and Phoenician spoken alongside your northern Germanic dialect. You hand over your 50 pounds of Baltic amber. In return, the Mediterranean merchants hand you something that will make you a king in the north. Ingots of Cypriot copper, bars of Cornish tin, rolls of purple-dyed Aegean wool, and crates of bronze swords with inlaid golden hilts. Archaeological excavations along the Vistula and Danube rivers have uncovered the physical staging posts of the Bronze Age amber merchants. At the fortified settlement of Biskupin in northern Poland, dating to the late Bronze Age, archaeologists excavated an entire wooden island fortress housing over 1,000 people. The town was surrounded by an immense breakwater of thousands of oak stakes driven into the lake bed, protecting a planned grid of 13 parallel wooden streets lined with over 100 standardized timber longhouses. Inside the longhouses, excavators recovered specialized amber workshops containing raw nodules, flint saws, bone polishers, and thousands of discarded amber chips, proving that Biskupin was a major fortified customs and processing station along the Central Amber Road. To understand who controlled the central section of the Amber Road during the early Bronze Age, one must study the Unetice culture, centered in Bohemia, Silesia, and central Germany. The Uneticians were the masters of Central European metallurgy and commerce. They controlled the strategic copper deposits of the Harz Mountains and the tin streams of the Erzgebirge, positioning themselves as the indispensable middlemen between the Baltic amber sources in the north and the Mediterranean markets in the south. At the Unetice settlement of Nebra in Saxony-Anhalt, Germany, metal detectorists and archaeologists discovered one of the most astonishing astronomical masterpieces in human history: the Nebra sky disk. The disk is a circular bronze plate 30 centimeters in diameter, weighing over 2 kilograms, patinated to a deep blue-green color. Inlaid into the bronze surface in solid gold leaf are astronomical symbols: a golden crescent moon, a radiant golden sun, 32 individual golden stars, and a cluster of 7 stars representing the Pleiades constellation. Geochemical trace element and isotope analysis of the materials used in the Nebra sky disk revealed a breathtaking international synthesis. The copper came from the Mitterberg mines in the Austrian Alps. The gold used for the celestial inlays came from the Carnon River in Cornwall, England. And preserved in contemporary Unetice graves adjacent to the find were hundreds of beads of Baltic amber. The Nebra sky disk was an astronomical calculator used by Bronze Age priest-chieftains to harmonize the solar and lunar calendars, determining the exact dates for planting and harvesting crops. It proves that the societies along the Amber Road possessed advanced astronomical science, complex mathematics, and international supply chains that integrated the mineral resources of the entire European continent. The maritime and riverine transport technology that powered the Amber Road was revealed in spectacular detail in 1992 during construction work in the town of Dover, England. The Dover Bronze Age boat. The Dover boat is the world's oldest known ocean-going sailplank vessel in Europe. Measuring over 9.5 meters in length and 2 meters wide, the boat was constructed from massive, straight-grained planks of English oak. The shipwrights carved integrated cleats and internal ribs directly out of the solid oak timbers, stitching the planks together with twisted cords of yew branches. The seams were caulked with crushed moss and beeswax, and the hull was propelled by a crew of up to 16 paddlers. The Dover boat and the similar Ferriby boats excavated on the Humber estuary prove that Bronze Age Europeans were not using crude rafts. They were building highly sophisticated, flexible, ocean-going transport craft capable of carrying tons of cargo across the English Channel and navigating the broad river mouths of the Rhine, the Elbe, and the Vistula. Along these waterways, the fortified hill forts of the Lausitz culture controlled the river junctions. These settlements, like the massive lake fortress of Biskupin in Poland, were designed with dense, defensive ramparts of box and timber construction filled with earth and stones, flanked by wooden watchtowers. The chieftains who ruled these river strongholds extracted transit tariffs on every boat passing down the river, accumulating massive hoards of bronze axes, amber collars, and gold torques that established their dynastic supremacy over the European heartland. In the British Isles, the transport of imported Baltic amber was coordinated along ancient upland chalk trackways, the Ridgeway and the Icknield Way. These prehistoric Ridgeway roads, dating back over 5,000 years, ran along the high chalk downs of southern England, avoiding the dense, impassable oak forests and mosquito-infested bogs of the lowlands. Along these elevated highways, traveling merchants transported Baltic amber that had washed ashore on the beaches of East Anglia or been traded across the North Sea, carrying the golden resin straight to the great ceremonial complexes of Avebury, Silbury Hill, and Stonehenge. The landscape of prehistoric Britain was an interconnected sacred geography where trade routes, astronomical monuments, and ancestral burial barrows formed a single unified spiritual network. The circuit is complete. For over a century, traditional historians believed that the Amber Road was only an indirect, local affair. They argued that northern amber never really reached the grand empires of the eastern Mediterranean during the height of the Bronze Age. And then, modern archaeology unlocked the tombs. In 1922, in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, Howard Carter broke the seal on the intact tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, King Tut, who died in 1323 BCE. Inside the antechamber and the burial vault, Carter discovered the most dazzling treasure hoard in human history: golden shrines, gilded chariots, alabaster vases, and royal jewelry encrusted with lapis lazuli, turquoise, and carnelian. Among the treasures was a magnificent royal pectorale, a ceremonial breastplate worn by the young pharaoh during state religious ceremonies. Right in the center of the breastplate, surrounded by golden serpents and the wings of Horus, was a large, beautifully carved scarab beetle made of a glowing, translucent golden stone. For decades, Egyptologists assumed the scarab was made of chalcedony or local resin. In the late 20th century, scientists applied advanced chemical analysis, specifically Fourier-transform infrared spectroscopy, to the scarab and other royal jewelry in Egyptian museums. FTIR spectroscopy can identify a specific chemical bond known as the Baltic shoulder, a distinctive spectral curve between 8 and 9 micrometers caused by the presence of succinic acid, which is unique to amber harvested from the Baltic region. The results were unequivocal. King Tutankhamun was wearing amber that had been gathered on the shores of the Baltic Sea, over 3,000 miles away from the Nile River. Think about the staggering geographical scale of that connection. In 1323 BC, an amber nodule washed ashore in modern-day Poland or Denmark. A Bronze Age hunter picked it up. It was traded through dozens of intermediate tribal networks, crossed the Moravian Gate, traveled down the Danube, was carried across the Aegean Sea on a Mycenaean ship, arrived at the Nile Delta, was purchased by royal artisans in Thebes, carved into the sacred form of the sun god Khepri, and placed upon the chest of the living god king of Egypt. And Egypt was not alone. When German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann excavated the royal shaft graves at Mycenae in Greece, the legendary home of King Agamemnon, he opened Grave Circle A and Grave Circle B, dating between 1600 BCE and 1400 BCE. Inside those royal tombs, draped across the skeletons of Mycenaean warrior princes buried with golden death masks, Schliemann found over 4,000 amber beads in single graves. Spectrographic testing revealed that over 95% of all the amber in Mycenaean Greece was Baltic amber. The Mycenaean elites were obsessed with amber. They strung hundreds of amber beads into massive multi-strand collars and necklaces that covered their chests like golden armor. At the Great Late Bronze Age trading emporium of Fradicina, in the Po River Valley of northern Italy, Italian and British archaeologists excavated the industrial crossroads of Europe. Fradicina was a proto-urban center covering over 20 hectares along a major paleo-channel of the Po River. Excavators found specialized workshops where Baltic amber was processed alongside glass beads manufactured using Egyptian sodaflux recipes, bronze weapons cast from alpine copper, elephant ivory imported from the Levant, and ostrich eggshells from North Africa. Fradicina was the international industrial factory of the ancient Mediterranean, where the raw materials of the barbarian north were manufactured into high-fashion luxury goods for export to the palaces of Greece and Egypt. The reach of the Amber Road was not confined to a single north-south corridor. It branched across the English Channel to connect with the wealthy aristocracy of the Wessex culture in southern Britain, the builders of the final monumental stone phases of Stonehenge. In the barrows and burial mounds surrounding Stonehenge, such as the famous Bush Barrow and the Upton Lovell Golden Barrow, archaeologists excavated dazzling hoards of amber jewelry. Wessex chieftains and high priestesses were buried with elaborate spacer plate necklaces, composed of hundreds of flat, trapezoidal amber plaques drilled with complex internal horizontal boreholes. These spacer plates were engineered with mathematical precision to hold 8 to 10 parallel strands of amber beads in a rigid, crescent-shaped collar that draped across the shoulders of the wearer. And when archaeologists examined the amber necklaces recovered from the royal shaft graves at Mycenae in Greece, they made an extraordinary discovery. The Mycenaean amber necklaces used the exact same complex spacer plate designs, with identical internal borehole configurations and geometric proportions, as the necklaces found at Stonehenge. Chemical FTIR testing confirmed that both the Stonehenge and Mycenaean necklaces were manufactured from Baltic amber. This was not a coincidence. It proves that in 1600 BCE, an international luxury fashion style and bead drilling technology was shared between the architects of Stonehenge in Britain, the amber gatherers of the Baltic, and the Homeric warrior kings of Mycenaean Greece. The elite aristocracies of Europe were bound together in a shared cultural and aesthetic network that spanned thousands of miles of ocean and land. If you want to see the ultimate, indisputable physical proof that Baltic amber was woven into the very fabric of the late Bronze Age global economy, you only have to dive 44 meters beneath the surface of the Mediterranean Sea off the southern coast of Turkey. The Uluburun Shipwreck. Discovered in 1982 by a local sponge diver and excavated over 11 years by nautical archaeologists George Bass and Simul Polluck from the Institute of Nautical Archaeology, the Uluburun Shipwreck is the most important maritime archaeological discovery in world history. The ship was a merchant vessel, likely constructed of Lebanese cedar, that sank on its way from the Levant toward the Aegean palaces of Mycenae. In its hold was a floating microcosm of the entire Late Bronze Age international economy. 10 metric tons of pure Cypriot copper cast into 354 oxide ingots. 1 metric ton of pure tin from Central Asia or Europe. The exact 10-to-1 ratio needed to cast 11 tons of high-grade bronze weapons. 140 Canaanite ceramic amphorae filled with over a ton of aromatic terebinth resin used for manufacturing Royal Egyptian and Mycenaean perfumes. Logs of African blackwood and unworked elephant ivory tusks from Sudan. A solid gold royal scarab inscribed with the personal hieroglyphs of Queen Nefertiti of Egypt. Gold and silver Canaanite jewelry, bronze swords, and Mycenaean painted pottery. And resting among the personal belongings of the elite merchants on board the ship were 41 beads of pure golden amber. When chemical FTR spectroscopy was applied to the Uluburun amber beads in international laboratories, the spectral analysis revealed the unmistakable Baltic shoulder signature. The amber was Baltic succinite. Think about what was discovered on that single sunken ship. Here, resting in the hold of a Bronze Age wooden vessel off the coast of Turkey, was the physical intersection of 4 separate continents: African ivory, Egyptian gold, Central Asian tin, Cypriot copper, Levantine resin, Mycenaean weapons, and amber gathered by barbarian hunter-traders from the freezing shores of the Baltic Sea. The Uluburun shipwreck proved that the Bronze Age was not a collection of isolated, primitive cultures. It was the world's first truly integrated global supply chain, and Baltic amber was its most precious northern thread. At the southern terminus of the Amber Road, at the head of the Adriatic Sea, sat the great Roman industrial metropolis of Aquileia. Aquileia was the global capital of luxury amber craftsmanship. Archaeologists excavating the artisan quarters along the ancient Nadeso River uncovered dozens of specialized amber working ateliers containing thousands of carved objects in every stage of manufacture: rough unworked nodules, sawn blanks, bronze wire saws, fine abrasive sand from the Volturno River used for polishing, and specialized lathe-turned workshops. The master gem carvers of Aquileia transformed raw northern lumps into dazzling miniature works of Hellenistic and Roman art, portrait busts of imperial Roman emperors, translucent gaming dice, delicate cosmetic jars engraved with mythological nymphs, and intricate ring cameos that caught the Mediterranean sun. From Aquileia, these luxury masterpieces were loaded onto Roman merchant galleys and exported across the entire Mediterranean basin to Alexandria, Antioch, Carthage, and Rome. To the Mycenaeans, amber was the ultimate symbol of supreme aristocratic status. It proved that your lineage had the wealth, the diplomatic connections, and the maritime power to reach across the entire European continent to touch the mysterious, magical treasures of the Hyperborean North. Why did the northern warrior elite sell their sacred amber? They didn't sell it for grain. The north had fertile pastures and abundant game. They didn't sell it for wood. the north was covered in boundless forests. They sold it for the single material that could maintain their military dominance over the European continent. Metal. Northern Europe, specifically Denmark, northern Germany, and southern Sweden, possesses almost zero natural deposits of copper or tin ore. Geologically speaking, the Nordic region should have remained trapped in the Stone Age. And yet, the Nordic Bronze Age produced some of the richest, most abundant, and most masterfully crafted bronze weapons and jewelry anywhere in the ancient world. Archaeologists in Scandinavia have excavated over 25,000 massive bronze artifacts, flange-hilted swords with spiral-decorated pommels, heavy battle axes, cast bronze shields, ceremonial luas, and intricate female belt plates. Where did all that metal come from? Every single ounce of copper and tin in Scandinavia was imported. Lead isotope and trace element analysis conducted by Swedish archaeologist Christian Christensen has proven that the copper fueling the Nordic Bronze Age came from two primary sources: the copper mines of the Austrian Alps and the colossal copper mines of Cyprus and the Mediterranean. The Amber Road was an equal, reciprocal exchange of technologies and materials. The North had a monopoly on the world's most magical luxury resin. The South had a monopoly on the industrial metal of war. Every summer, tons of Baltic amber flowed south down the river highways. And every autumn, tons of raw copper ingots and bronze weapons flowed north back up the rivers. Amber bought the Nordic Bronze Age. Without the Amber Road, there would have been no bronze swords in Scandinavia. There would have been no sun chariot of Trundholm. There would have been no bronze luas. The North would have remained armed with stone axes and bone spears. And with that metal came something even more transformative: the ideology of the warrior aristocracy. Along the Amber Road traveled the culture of the hero. The concept of individual martial glory, the code of the duel, the prestige of the sword-bearing chieftain, the construction of monumental burial mounds raised above the landscape to commemorate fallen warlords. These ideological concepts spread across Europe from the Mediterranean to the Baltic, carried by the exact same traders who carried the amber and the bronze. The Amber Road was the cultural spine that forged a common European Bronze Age identity. The ideological impact of the Amber Road is preserved in the monumental landscape of European tumuli. Across Denmark, northern Germany, and Poland, Bronze Age communities raised over 50,000 massive earthen burial mounds above the landscape to commemorate their sword-bearing chieftains and elite women. In the famous Egg burial in Denmark, archaeologists excavated the intact oak coffin grave of an elite young woman. She was buried wearing a fine woolen corded skirt, a bronze belt plate decorated with spiral sun motifs, and a necklace of Baltic amber beads. Strontium isotope analysis of her teeth, hair, and fingernails proved that she was not born in Denmark. She had spent her childhood in the Black Forest region of southern Germany, traveling hundreds of miles across the Amber Road to marry a Nordic chieftain as part of an international dynastic alliance designed to secure the trade of amber and bronze. At the colossal copper mining complex of Mitterberg in the Austrian Alps, Austrian archaeologists excavated the industrial heart of the Bronze Age European economy. Between 1600 BC and 1000 BC, Mitterberg operated on an industrial scale that rivaled the Roman Empire. Over 30 deep mining galleries were driven hundreds of meters into the quartz-schist mountainside using fire-setting techniques, building massive timber fires against the rock faces until the stone was red-hot, then quenching it with cold water to shatter the ore. Thousands of specialized miners, timber fellers, charcoal burners, and smelters lived in permanent industrial villages perched high in the alpine valleys. The Mitterberg complex produced over 20,000 metric tons of refined copper during the Bronze Age, which was cast into standardized oxide ingots and ribbon ingots and exported along the Amber Road to Scandinavia, Britain, and the Mediterranean. And with that metal, Central European smiths developed the supreme weapon of the Bronze Age: the Nally two-flange-hilted cut-and-thrust sword. Earlier Bronze Age swords were casting experiments, rapiers with thin tangs riveted to wooden handles that snapped if used for heavy slashing. The Nally II sword, invented in the Danube basin around 1400 BC, featured a solid bronze blade forged in a single piece with the hilt, reinforced with raised lateral flanges that securely held wooden or horn grip plates. The Nally II was virtually indestructible, perfectly balanced for both lethal thrusting and crushing slashing blows against bone and armor. Carried along the Amber Road, the Nally II sword spread rapidly across the entire continent, adopted by Nordic chieftains, Celtic warriors, Mycenaean heroes, and the mysterious sea peoples whose devastating invasions brought down the empires of the eastern Mediterranean in 1200 BCE. The spiritual and ideological universe of the Nordic Bronze Age is immortalized across thousands of smooth granite bedrock outcrops in southern Sweden and Norway. The UNESCO World Heritage Petroglyphs of Tanum. Carved into the glacier-scoured granite rock faces with hard quartzite chisels between 1700 BC and 500 BC are thousands of vivid, dynamic scenes. Over 1,000 sleek, double-ended ocean ships with high curved prows decorated with horse heads, manned by dozens of stylized rowers. Horned warriors wielding massive Nally II bronze broadswords and battle axes. Pairs of twin warrior gods leaping over ceremonial solar discs. And the sacred solar disc itself, carried across the sky by solar horses, solar bulls, and celestial solar ships. To the Nordic people, the sun was locked in an eternal cosmic cycle, traveling across the heavens by day in a solar chariot, descending into the underworld ocean at sunset, and carried through the dark subterranean waters by a divine solar ship to be reborn in the dawn. Because amber was the physical tears of that solar deity, amber was central to sacred ritual offerings. In the peat bogs of Denmark and Sweden, sites like Trundholm, Gundestrup, and Illerup, archaeologists have excavated thousands of votive hoards placed directly into ancient wetlands, masses of unworked amber nodules, finely carved amber sun discs, and giant bronze swords deliberately bent and broken to kill the weapon and release its spirit to the gods of the water. And women played a central, commanding role in this amber bronze economy. In the Nordic Bronze Age, elite women were not passive observers. They were the high priestesses of the sun cult and the diplomatic ambassadors of international trade. Burials like the Egged Girl and the Skridstrup woman in Denmark reveal young women buried in magnificent ceremonial regalia, woven woolen tunics, elaborate bronze spiral belt plates that symbolize the radiant solar disk, and heavy necklaces of Baltic amber beads. These women traveled thousands of miles across Europe to forge dynastic marital alliances between Baltic amber-gathering clans and Central European copper mining dynasties, acting as the human bridges that kept the continental supply chain unbroken for over 8 centuries. And the control of this lucrative river highway led to the largest, most violent military clash in prehistoric European history. The Talents Valley Battlefield. In the 1990s, amateur archaeologists walking along the banks of the Talents River in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, northern Germany, discovered human bones protruding from the riverbanks. Subsequent excavations led by the State Authority for Culture and Monument Preservation in Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania revealed a nightmare of ancient warfare. Scattered across a mile-long stretch of the river valley, buried in waterlogged peat, were the skeletal remains of over 140 young men, dozens of horses, and hundreds of deadly weapons: bronze spearheads, flint arrowheads, wooden war clubs carved from ash and sloe wood, and now 2 bronze swords. Forensic bioarchaeological analysis revealed horrific trauma: unhealed skull fractures caused by crushing blunt force blows from wooden clubs, bronze spearheads embedded deep in pelvic bones, and arrowheads still stuck in vertebrae. And based on the density of remains excavated so far, military historians estimate that over 4,000 Bronze Age warriors participated in this titanic battle, with over 1,000 men killed in a single afternoon. Who were these men, and why were they fighting? Strontium and lead isotope analysis of the dental enamel of the fallen warriors revealed that the combatants were divided into 2 distinct groups. One group was local to the northern German plains. The other group consisted of non-local warriors whose isotopic signatures proved they had traveled hundreds of miles from the south, from Bohemia, Silesia, and the Danube Valley. And where did this colossal battle take place? At a strategic, engineered wooden bridge and causeway across the Talents River, the primary river crossing for the central branch of the Amber Road. This was not a cattle raid between local farmers. This was a major, organized, international military campaign involving trained warrior retinues, cavalry mounts, and professional logistics, fought to control the primary customs choke point where Baltic amber traveled south and Mediterranean bronze traveled north. The Amber Road was so extraordinarily valuable that 4,000 years ago, kings and chieftains were willing to mobilize thousands of armored warriors to march across the European continent to drown their rivals in the freezing mud of a northern river. In central Sweden, near Uppsala, archaeologists excavated the Haga Mound, dating to approximately 1000 BC, the richest Bronze Age royal burial in Scandinavia. Inside a colossal stone cairn covered by an earthen mound over 7 meters high, excavators discovered the charred bones of a Nordic warrior king buried inside a massive oak log coffin. The king was outfitted in magnificent bronze and gold armor, a bronze Naui-2 sword with a pommel covered in sheets of solid gold foil, a cast bronze razor decorated with solar ship motifs, and dozens of large, polished amber beads that had survived the funeral pyre. The Haga burial stands as monumental proof that the amber for bronze trade had created a pan-European aristocratic culture whose wealth and ceremonial prestige reached all the way to the Arctic Circle. It proved that Europe was never a collection of isolated, primitive tribes. It was a single, vast, interconnected economic and cultural organism. For nearly 800 years, the Amber Road pumped wealth, technology, and ideas across the European continent. It seemed eternal. The demand for amber in the palaces of Egypt, Mycenae, and Babylon was insatiable. The supply of amber on the shores of the Baltic was infinite. And then, in the 12th century BC, the world went dark. Around 1200 BC, a catastrophic wave of violence, drought, and civilizational collapse swept across the Mediterranean. The Mycenaean palaces in Greece were burned to the ground. The Hittite Empire in Anatolia was completely erased from history. The new kingdom of Egypt was crippled by invasions from the mysterious sea peoples and never fully recovered. The great trading ports of Ugarit and the Levant were reduced to piles of smoking ash. We call this event the Late Bronze Age collapse. And when the Mediterranean palaces burned, the economic engine of the Amber Road stalled. The kings of Mycenae were dead. There was no one left to buy 4,000 amber beads for a royal tomb. The trade routes were overrun by bandits and displaced refugees. The long-distance river voyages became too dangerous to sustain. The flow of Mediterranean copper to the north slowed to a trickle. The Nordic Bronze Age began to decline, eventually transitioning into the colder, darker, more localized world of the pre-Roman Iron Age. The Amber Road never truly died. It would be revived centuries later by the Celts and the Roman Empire, but its first, glorious golden age had ended. We have walked the Stone Age trails of volcanic glass in Episode 1. We have sailed the Bronze Age ghost ships of the Arabian Sea in Episode 2. We have navigated the river highways of European amber in Episode 3. Every step of our journey has shown us that humanity's urge to connect is an unstoppable force of nature. And in our next episode, we are going to explore the longest, most dangerous, and most legendary trail of them all. We are traveling 3,000 miles to the east, to the jagged, windswept peaks of the Hindu Kush and the Badakhshan mountains of ancient Afghanistan. We are going to follow a trail of stone as blue as the midnight sky, a stone that adorned the death mask of Tutankhamun and the gates of Babylon. Next time, on Season 1 of The Grand Narrative. Join us as we explore the world's most perilous mountain trade route. Episode 4: The Lapis Lazuli Route. We will uncover how ancient miners hacked deep into the frozen cliffs of Afghanistan 4,000 years ago, and how that blue treasure traveled across 3 continents to forge the empires of the East. Join us for Episode 4: The Lapis Lazuli Route. I am your host. Thank you for listening to The Grand Narrative. The cultural memory of the Amber Road survived long after the Bronze Age collapsed, leaving deep mythological footprints in classical literature. In the Odyssey, Homer describes the wealthy Phoenician merchants arriving at Greek islands bearing a golden necklace hung with amber beads, a marvel to behold. The Greek philosopher Thales of Miletus, in the 6th century BCE, conducted the world's first recorded scientific experiments on the electrostatic properties of amber, concluding that because amber could move objects without touching them, it must possess a living soul. From that single philosophical spark, ignited by the static charge of a Baltic resin bead, was born the Western tradition of natural philosophy, empirical physics, and the scientific investigation of the forces of the universe. The economic obsession with Baltic amber did not end with the fall of Rome. In the 13th century, it birthed one of the most ruthless commercial monopolies in European history. The Bernstein Monopole of the Teutonic Order. When the crusading military order of the Teutonic Knights conquered the pagan Baltic lands of Old Prussia, they recognized that the real wealth of the province was not in timber or wheat, but in the blue earth of the Sambia Peninsula. The Grand Master of the Teutonic Order proclaimed the regale, all amber found on the beaches, washed up by the waves, or dug from the earth belonged exclusively to the order. The knights established an iron-fisted legal code. Every local fisherman and peasant was legally conscripted as an unfree amber gatherer. The entire Baltic coast was patrolled day and night by armed knight bailiffs. If a peasant was caught concealing a single piece of raw amber in his pocket, he was convicted of high treason against the order and condemned to be hanged on the nearest coastal gallows without trial, a brutal regime of capital punishment designed to protect the sovereign monopoly of the tears of the sun. Look at the extraordinary historical arc of this single material. 50 million years ago, a prehistoric pine tree in a long-vanished subtropical forest bled resin to heal a broken branch. 12,000 years ago, a freezing Stone Age hunter picked up that hardened resin on a barren beach and marveled that it was not cold. 4,000 years ago, Bronze Age chieftains died in the mud of the Talents Valley fighting to control its trade, and Egyptian pharaohs wore it across their chests as divine armor against death. 2,000 years ago, Roman knights rode 1,500 miles beyond the edge of civilization to fill imperial amphitheaters with its golden glow. And today, when we flip an electric switch, or when we look through the lens of a microscope to study the DNA of a 50-million-year-old insect preserved in amber, we are looking at the eternal thread of human curiosity and connection. The Amber Road was not just a path through the wilderness. It was the highway that forged the mind, the science, and the interconnected soul of humanity. And so, across 50 million years of geological time and 4,000 years of human history, amber remains what it has always been, a bridge between worlds. It bridged the ancient prehistoric forest and the modern scientific laboratory. It bridged the barbarian warrior clans of the Baltic and the golden palaces of the Mediterranean pharaohs. It proved that human curiosity, human greed, and human wonder could cross any mountain range, conquer any river, and stitch the farthest corners of the earth into one shared human destiny. The Amber Road was not merely a trade route. It was the sacred golden lifeline of ancient Europe, illuminating the dark primeval forests with the promise of civilization.